Welcome back to the Chiro Money Show, where we're helping chiropractors make better financial decisions so they can build stability in their finances and a lifestyle that they love. We're your hosts, Chris Shiel and Scott Campbell, and we're excited to dive into a fun topic with you today on one that comes up very often. It's already come up in our first few episodes. We're excited to go into more detail on that. But first, Scott, why don't you tell our three listeners what we've been up to?
Yeah, to our wives and parents who might be listening. You know what? My daughter was actually listening to our first episode yesterday, so we got a listener.
Got a listen. Amazing.
Exciting.
Yeah.
Very exciting. Yeah, what have we been up to? It's a exciting time of year. The fall is always a busy time. For you got hunting season all of September. And in the fall here in October, we get into what we refer to as our fall planning time frame, where we're seeing all of our clients for one of our three primary kind of planning meetings throughout the year. And in addition to that, we also have a lot of travel in the works as well. We were just away in Toronto for the Alliance for Chiropractic Fall Conference. We happen to also be there in town for our first endeavor into High Rocks, and we both got to compete into a couple races. Chris and I ran individually on the Friday, and then we got to team up and run doubles on Sunday, and that was pretty exciting. We had a lot of fun.
Yep, love it. What a whirlwind. It was a quick trip to Toronto, but action packed. Was not a vacation in any way.
Definitely not. Some late nights and early mornings, and get to do it again in a couple of weeks here off to Vancouver for the Lux Chiropractic Conference here, October 17th, 18th. That should be a lot of fun.
It should be fun for sure.
Yep.
I can't help but draw parallels. I mean, obviously there's so many between finance and fitness and, just so many things we could say, but I just wanted to point out that well, first of all, I have to share with our listeners that I did beat Scott in the individual race.
I was trying to just skim over that.
Yeah. By a whole 17 seconds, right? So
that's right.
And it all came down to wall balls.
Yeah.
But the real point I wanted to make was that together we were more than 13 minutes faster to complete the same thing, even though it's the same amount of running, it's the same station work. It's just crazy. You get some micro 10-second breaks in there, but it seemed absurd that we cut that much time off working when we worked together. But yeah, I just feel we crushed it as individuals. We had fun. We were able to do it, but it was so much more enjoyable and so much faster to do it together. And I think that, we could easily draw that parallel to working with an advisor, working with a great team to manage your business. Man, it's so much better if you just have the right people and can rely on their strengths and, fill in the areas that you might need some help or are weak, like wall balls or things like that. I don't know.
We don't talk about wall balls. We don't talk about that. No. But yeah, you're right. You can crush it on your own like we did individually, but when you can go at it with the right partner, that's optimization at its finest.
Yep, totally.
For sure.
All right. So what are we talking about today, Scott?
We're diving into one of our favorite kind of topics that we want to talk about with all of our new clients, and that's cash flow. But, we always want to talk about cash flow in all areas, personal side, but also in the practice. And that's where it all starts. So we touched on previous episodes already about systems and managing cash flow. So we thought, hey, we need to dive into this in a little bit more detail about what profit first is, what a cash flow system looks like in your practice. So we needed to hammer this one out here early days.
Definitely. Yep. Do you want me to share those scenarios, or do you want to dive into those?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, cool. So we want to give all of our listeners, all three of you, a couple of scenarios to consider. Okay. So scenario one, you're running an awesome practice, revenue solid. You log in and you look at your bank account and you see a number, right? I think it's such a habit for all of us to log into our online banking on our phone, and just check your balance. And that gives some level of comfort or maybe discomfort, but that directly translates into decision making based on that number you see, right? So say you log in and you see 50,000 or 15,000, whatever the number is. And then from that, you have to make some decisions. How much can you spend on expenses? When are those expenses coming out? When's the rent coming out? Will there be enough for payroll this month? Have you set enough aside for taxes? How much are you going to be able to pay yourself? Right. And that's the term that I've heard you coin and love so much. That's what we call bank balance accounting. And this is how most chiropractors run their business based on the
Yep.
number that they see. So how about scenario 2, Scott?
Yeah. Scenario 2 is what I would like to refer to as like having a more of a dashboard viewpoint on where you're at from a cash flow balance standpoint in your business. So yeah, imagine scenario 2 where you have that same $50,000. It doesn't really matter what the number is, but you log into your bank account and you now see a series of accounts that are properly labeled with a sole purpose for each one of those accounts. We have an account that is labeled owner's compensation. So we know whatever cash is in that account is set aside there for paying you your ongoing income on ideally an automated monthly basis. And then we have an account for expenses. So you know exactly what you have set aside for your continuous, operating expenses. You have money there to pay off the credit card bill when that comes due as well. You have an account set aside for taxes, so that's not a stress. A vault, we're going to get into all these, but you can quickly see how this can turn into a dashboard that works with our natural human behaviors of still logging in and checking a bank account balance. You'll see the total at the top, but now you can make decisions with more clarity on how much you can be spending and how much you can pay yourself. Taxes are set aside in their own proper account, and I have profit set aside in its own proper account. We're going to get into what profit first is and why it's important to be separating that profit right from the get-go. But 2 different scenarios here, right?
Yeah, same amount of money on hand. It's just instead of seeing it all in one place, we're seeing it in multiple places that have each location has a clear purpose, and that makes it easier for behaviorally for us to make strong decisions, right?
For sure. That's what it all comes down to. It's all how can we find the right system and process that matches our human behaviors, right? We're not robots. Like we're not AI. We're not spreadsheets in our head. Like we need to make human behavior-based decisions when we're doing something as simple as logging into our bank account and making the decision of whether or not you can hey, do I have money to do XYZ or this expense? If you have that right system in place, you can make those conscious and decisions with eyes wide open, so to speak.
Sure. And I think you would agree with me, Scott. This is not necessarily a super easy system to implement. It does take some effort, but the effort is so worth it. And I think, when we think of our clients that are implementing this, there is not one chiropractor that we work with that's implemented this system that would ever go back to the old way of managing their finances, right? It doesn't matter if they're doing $250 a year in revenue or $2 million a year in revenue. The principles work the same, and the peace of mind with having the system is just unmatched, right? Yeah, no one would go back to bank balance accounting after starting this.
For sure. I know I wouldn't. I've been using Profit First myself in my business since 2017. When someone first gave me a copy of Profit First. Mm-hmm. By the way, we should give some credit here. Profit First is based on a book written by Michalowicz. Mm-hmm. Fantastic. Basically, this book was designed for small business owners to properly manage cash flow in their system. Someone handed over a copy of it to me in 2017. I was like, I need this. I implemented it right away, and I never looked back and quickly realized I got to help my clients do the same thing.
Yeah, totally. So what's the key point of Profit First? Obviously, it's the systems and structure, but where would you say this really comes into play? Yeah,
so Profit First, from a really high level, a basic level, it's basically the envelope system. We've heard of kind of the old budgeting techniques that maybe, grandma used to do. And rather than having a spreadsheet to kind of keep track of your numbers, you would take your paycheck as it comes in and allocate certain dollar amounts towards groceries and when you want to have the mortgage due and for discretionary spending, you name it, different jars or envelopes for different purposes. Essentially, the Profit First system is applying the envelope system to your bank accounts in that form.
Yeah. But I think the key difference, like that whole budgeting system of like the envelope or like like allocating every dollar, like we have our beef with that, right? Like we
Mm-hmm.
don't like the term budget even, and we find that like rigid budgets don't really work. And where this differs is like a system or a strategy, and we talk about allocations. So it's like setting aside a certain amount towards a certain purpose. But we got to recognize that, like we said earlier, like we're human after all. And it's not a rigid plan that, if a dollar goes into an envelope, it can only ever be used for the purpose that is written on that envelope. Right.
Yeah,
Like
that's right.
there's got to be some flexibility, right?
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's worth bringing up kind of one of the primary concepts in Profit First, and it's referred to as small plates
Mhm.
concept. When we go back to these series of accounts that you have set up and you're allocating cash flow into each one of these accounts, you can kind of view it as a series of small plates. You have one big plate, call it your platter, and it's kind of nice that we have Thanksgiving here this weekend. Think of it this way, if you were to serve the turkey on the main platter and put it down at the dinner table and you have 8 guests there, for example, would it be the best route to go to just let everyone take their fork and knife and just kind of have at the turkey and kind of take what they want? Chances are someone's going to get a lot more than someone else, right? And the fair, proper distribution of that turkey likely won't go as to plan. Whereas if you have a clear allocation strategy of who gets what and how much, those are your small plates. So your compensation, for example, your operating expenses, your taxes, your profit, maybe a vault for long-term kind of emergency savings. By having a proper strategy on how you allocate that turkey, or in your case, your collections and your income onto these small plates, that goes back to kind of that dashboard philosophy of when you log in, you've allocated that turkey into those separate accounts, your income, and now you can make proper plans based on your strategy for how you allocate your cash flow.
Yeah. Yeah. But this isn't just accounting, is it? Like this, like the behavioral component is so important here. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. It's not accounting. Like some people will kind of push back and say, well, I could just do this on a spreadsheet, right? Like I don't need to do this in separate bank accounts. I could just set this up on a spreadsheet, take my income, spread it out based on a plan, and make decisions based on that. But then it's counterintuitive because you go in and log into your bank account and it's still all one big number and you're still making decisions, right? You need to have that behavioral component of logging in, and regardless of whatever your spreadsheet says on your computer at home or whatever, you have a clear idea of exactly how cash flow is coming in and out of your practice. Let's use a number here, for example. Like I'll talk about, like, say expenses, for example. Say your strategy is that you want to be allocating 40% to operating expenses, and you've been allocating 40% of your collections into that expense account. If you go through, say, a couple months' time, and that expense account doesn't have enough money to pay the credit card bill, it's an immediate indicator that you're likely spending more than 40% on your overhead, right?
And how would you get that warning otherwise?
Exactly. If you were just using kind of that single bank account, kind of bank balance accounting where you have all your money in one pot, you don't really know if you're overspending. You might be spending okay, you might be spending in line, but you also might be spending 45% or 50%, and maybe that might not be a big deal for a short period of time, but it's an immediate indicator saying, I actually might need to overspending here. Do I need to relook at my expenses to make sure I'm in alignment with kind of the plan for the period of time that you're looking at?
Yeah, I think this is so important. And like, to me, the biggest reason that we love this system is it gives immediate feedback. And as a business owner, you need feedback quickly in order to make decisions and run a successful business. If your feedback comes at tax time when you complete your year end, like you've just gone through potentially 12 months of not great results and you don't even know. Or maybe you do because you feel it in your bank balances, but you don't have that immediate feedback to change and make good, strong decisions in your business.
Yeah. One thing I think we should point out too here before we really kind of move along is talking about why is it even called Profit First? like why was this system put together in the first place by the author Michalowicz? And when we think about kind of general accounting principles, it's always sales minus expenses equals your profit. That's the typical formula in terms of figuring out how profitable that you are. And what Mike, the author, basically said was like, what if you kind of just flip that formula around and did sales minus profit equals your expenses? So you take your profit, you want to take your profit first, right? And it all comes back down to like, why did you start the business in the first place? You know, something that I always say to, in particular, our practice owners is that we want to see you in a position where you're paying yourself well for the work that you're doing as a chiropractor and for the additional responsibilities of running a practice, but you should also be earning a profit for taking on the risk of ownership. And clearly defining what those two things are and having those in separate areas and being like, you know what, I'm going to take a profit first. Right? When income comes in, I'm going to take, you know, whether it's 1%, 5%, or 20% off the top and allocate that into a separate account called profit before bills get paid, before I get paid, before taxes get paid. Feels pretty good, right?
Yeah, totally.
Mike always says, like, if you can run your business on, you know, $1, you know, if you take away percent, surely you can run it on 99 cents.
Yeah.
Right? It's just a behavioral thing.
Totally. And it's such an important concept because I know so many business owners and chiropractors that run practices that don't feel like they're fairly rewarded for the effort that they're putting out there. And when we can separate these two things as like, okay, your work as a chiropractor, if you went out to market and worked as an associate somewhere, you are worth X amount of dollars, depending on your patient volume and all these different things. But like, you should be paid for that work. But then on top of that, you've taken on this significant risk of running a business, and you should be compensated for that as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And to be fair, like when it's early days, you're just starting the practice, maybe there's like little to no actual profit. And you're maybe not at a point right away where you can pay yourself like what would be deemed a fair kind of market wage for like, say, a full-time associate. But if you understand your numbers and you have a clear system, even if you're setting aside just 1% of your collections to profit, you've gotten the habit of prioritizing profit. And then you can build out the systems and processes to move the practice forward to say, I'm going to start moving my overhead down, my owner's compensation up, and ideally profitability from 1%. And maybe in a year from now, we get that to 3%. And in a couple of years from now, we're at 10%, right? And you can kind of have that evolve over time where you're at a point where you're like, I'm getting paid myself. I get paid well for the work that I do as a chiropractor. And in our ideal world, on a quarterly or a semi-annual basis, you can also pay yourself a nice profit check from your practice for all that additional risk that you've taken on for running a practice.
Yeah, 100%. It's really similar to like the pay yourself first concept, which we talk about in reference to investing personally and saving personally, right? Like I think a lot of people are familiar with that. Like, and again, we have a similar outlook to that. It's like, if you have student loans and a decent debt load that you're chunking away at, like, that's great. We want you to pay off that debt, but also start saving and investing consistently because like you were saying about the profit, like even if it's just 1% or like a small, like $50 a month or something that you're putting towards your future savings and investments, that is going to start this habit and build consistency. And as debt's paid off, you increase that amount that you're saving and investing. And really, I mean, that's how you're building wealth at the end of the day.
Yep, absolutely.
Yep. All right, Scott. So what does this actually look like in real life, right? So where do we start? We want to start implementing profit first. Where do we begin?
Yep. I think later on the tail end of the show, we'll talk about a baby step that you can take to get started. But let's talk about what the actual system looks like and what the kind of the core or key accounts are that you would need to have set up at your banking institution to run a proper kind of profit first system. So we have 6 key accounts that we would ask someone to get set up. We have an income account, and I'm just going to classify what all these accounts kind of do here and what the purpose is for each of these accounts. We'd have an income account. That's where all of your collections and revenue is going to flow into. And in that income account, there's not going to be any debits from that account. Think of that as the platter that I talked about earlier. That's just where the turkey is going to land. And at some point here in the near future, we're going to divvy up that turkey. So
all collections, all revenue is coming into this income account.
That's right. Yeah. So we'll pause there we'll talk about what that means in terms of what we do with that collection here in a moment. But then let's talk about the other accounts that we need. So we need 5 other additional accounts. One would be your profit account. So if we're going to use profit first here, the first account that we need is profit. All right. And that's an amount that we're going to split off from a percentage standpoint and allocate that and set aside our profit first. Check that off. Next, we're going to have an account that we call owner's comp, or your personal income account, whatever you want to call it. That's going to be the amount that we're going to be allocating to pay you a regular paycheck from your practice. Next would be an expense account, or we like to coin the short term is called OPEX, or operating expenses. So an account that's clearly there for the purpose of paying for your overhead, including payroll, not your pay as the owner, but payroll for your staff and all your other overheads. So that could be direct debits from your OPEX account, or that could mean paying off your corporate credit card or business credit card from that OPEX account. And then the final 2 would be one for your taxes. Tax account can look very different depending on how you pay yourself, whether you're paying yourself salary or dividends or a combination of both. But we think of that tax account as the account that you need to have set up to cover your corporate taxes. That could look a little bit different for someone who's a sole proprietor, say they're an associate, but in the context of this conversation, we're talking about, say, a practice owner that's fully incorporated. And then the final account would be what we refer to as the vault account, an account that we're setting aside cash into. That could be an account that's going to be built up over time for kind of like just a vault of cash, like your emergency bucket for the practice. Maybe that gets to a threshold at some point where you get to a safe point and you say, hey, I want to start investing some cash corporately. You could start looking at that. But from a big picture, those are the 6 accounts that we would need to have set up to put together an effective system.
Yep. So if a client's working with us to set this up, we're going through all of this work to help them understand the system. And then we're basically sending them with a PDF to their bank where they have their corporate accounts and saying, here's the accounts you need. You need to open these 6 different accounts. Some of them can be checking accounts, some can be savings accounts. We are mindful of fees. We know that 6 accounts is a lot, but at the end of the day, it's super important to get these 6 accounts opened and then also to label them. You know, most online banking institutions give you the ability to label these accounts, and that's where the dashboard comes in. And if you can just get to that point, man, what an awesome place to be, where you have all the different labeled accounts in your online banking, right?
Yep, absolutely. So if you're joining us on the YouTubes and can watch what we're sharing here, I can link it in the show notes as well to a PDF that we're referencing here. But it's basically the roadmap that you'd go into your bank with to say, here are the 6 accounts that I need. Help me. Here's the purpose for each of these accounts. You know, it's fun. It's interesting because sometimes personal bankers will be like, you want to do what with what account? Like you need 6. Like usually most bankers are going to be like, you need 1 checking account and maybe 1 savings account. Like, what are you talking about? So you need to go in there with a clear kind of game plan of like, here's what I need. There's a reason behind all this.
Yeah. Get it done for me. I need it.
Get it done. Yeah. That's right. That's right.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So once the accounts are set up, then what? Now we have our collections coming into the income account, and how and why do we divvy up our collections between those other 5?
Yep. So then it comes down to creating what we would refer to as an allocation strategy. Like, how are we going to allocate your cash flow? And that comes in the form of percentages. So we're going to talk some like high level numbers here in terms of like what kind of some averages are and like just an example, but every practice is going to be different, and how we arrive at someone's kind of percentages is going to be coming back to kind of what we talked about on a previous episode of looking at your profit and loss statement, especially that rolling 12-month one, and start to understand what your top line revenue is, your total collections that are coming into the practice. Maybe you got to pay out some associates, and then we can start coming up the plan of like, what's your overhead? You know, what do we need to set aside for taxes? How much would be nice to set aside for profit if there's room for that right away or into the vault? And then we come up with basically that final kind of like we're gonna allocate X percent to owner's compensation, X to profit, operating expenses, vault. So to talk about like an example, let's talk about OPEX or operating expenses. I would say that for the average for the practices that we've worked with, they typically fall somewhere between 45 and 55%. We definitely seen some practices, in the low 40s or high 30s. That would be like maybe the peak, like a great goal to get to long term. If you're maybe doing like $1 million plus in revenue, you might be able to get your overhead down to that low. If you're probably closer to maybe 200 to 400,000 of revenue, you're probably going to be close to that like 50 to 60% in overhead. Right. So let's use an average there of say you're at 45% operating expenses. Then we would, then have to divvy out probably the other three before we could look at your owner's comp. So let's say we're going to have 5% set aside to taxes, 5% to the vault, 5% to profit. And then the remainder, last 40%, let's say that's going to owner's compensation. Okay. Yep. So now we have a plan, not to say this is going to be the percentages that you're going to use forever, but typically speaking, here's the allocation strategy that we're going to stick to at least for the next quarter or 2 or 3 until we've reviewed our profit and loss again to make any sort of minor adjustments to ideally bring operating expenses down, bring profit and owner's comp up. Right.
Yeah, for sure. So that, yeah, we got to start somewhere, right? Like just to bring it back to the comment you had on a previous episode, like reviewing your like most recent 12-month P&L with the month-by-month comparison is your favorite way to look at that, right? Yeah. And so that'll give you a decent idea of like what your average expenses are and all that. Like, and that's a pretty great starting point. But at the end of the day, we just got to pick a starting point, an allocation percentage, and roll with that. So then once the income comes in and we have these percentages marked out, we have what we call our allocation sheet that we share with our clients that just maps out the amounts that need to be transferred to each account, right? And now we're just talking about an internal like bank account to account transfer, right?
Yep.
So
before we even get there, we need to commit with our client, or if you're the one doing this on your own, you need to commit to what we refer to as like a rhythm or an allocation date. This could be once a month. It could be twice a month. The typical is maybe the 10th and 25th, but maybe for someone it's like, I'm going to allocate my income or allocate my revenue, say every Tuesday of the month, every first Tuesday of the month, for example. That's when I'm going to go to my sheet. So to talk about this in actual practice, say you're someone who does their allocations once per month. Say it's the 10th. We'll use that as an example. It's the 10th of the month. You're going to log into your bank accounts. Ideally, all your collections or revenue has fallen into that one income account. You're going to take that income amount and you're going to plug it into what we'd ideally have like a spreadsheet for you that does that calculation for you and says, all right, if you've brought in $30,000, it's going to give you the exact amounts that you need to then transfer over to your other 5 accounts. Right? Sorry. And what's the outcome? Like, I'm thinking, outcome of this, why would we want to have these accounts and the separation? What are we thinking about when it comes to long-term, say a year or 2 into this, Chris, where do we want to see our clients at? Like, what's the outcome?
Yeah. I mean,
with having the profit first model in place.
At the end of the day, what we see is one of the biggest problems that clients often come to us with is overwhelm at taxes, right? So they either corporately or personally haven't set aside enough tax for their year end, and that's a big stressor. That's one of the first things that this system addresses is like, no, we are putting aside money for taxes. It's in a specific account that's labeled taxes. It's ready for you. That overwhelm is dealt with. Mm-hmm. Next, we want to increase your owner's compensation, what you are paid, right? Having a handle on your operating expenses, ideally keeping those in check or lowering those and increasing your owner's comp, is another ideal outcome. And that's often what we see. It's like clients will come to us with their messy bank balance accounting. And when they start implementing this system, they're either putting more towards debt repayment, they're keeping their expenses in check, they're paying themselves more, they have a tax plan. Mm-hmm. And it's a constant revisiting of can we tweak the allocations? We've paid off this debt. Now we want to put more towards this. And that goes, it goes back to this whole goal-based like allocation strategy where it's like you get to decide what you put money towards, what's important to you. But the only way you get to do that is if you have a great handle and awareness of where you stand. That's what this system allows, is it gives you that framework of knowing exactly where you're at.
For sure. And the one thing I'll add to this as well is if you're doing this consistently, it's not going to happen after your first month of allocations. But over time, ideally, say, for example, you've allocated 45% into your owner's compensation account. And I'm just going to pick a number. Say in a particular allocation period, you've allocated $12,000 into your owner's compensation account. But maybe you've decided that you're going to pay yourself $120,000 a year in salary, just as a number. That would mean that you're taking out $10,000 per month from your owner's comp, 120 obviously divided by 12. That's leaving $2,000 behind in your owner's comp account. And the same thing goes for your operating expense account. The idea isn't to drain that account down to zero each month. It's to continue to build that account up. So our goal always for a lot of our clients is like, this is again, not going to happen overnight. But if we're in a situation 12, 24 months from now, where you've been paying yourself consistently, well, you've been paying yourself a profit on a quarterly basis. And then on top of that, you're in a situation where you have 3 months worth of your operating expenses in your OPEX account. You have 3 months worth of your wages that you've been paying yourself consistently in your owner's comp account, in addition to what you've been continuously paying yourself on a regular basis. You know, you got a vault full of cash, you got your taxes set aside, and you've been taking your profit each quarter.
What a strong position. Yeah.
That's a strong position to be in, right?
How good does that feel? Like, I haven't met a chiropractor yet that doesn't like the idea of having 3 months worth of their pay set aside in case of emergencies, or that they know they can take holidays and pay themselves the same as they paid themselves last month. Like, come on.
That's the outcome that we want, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think it's very hard to get to that outcome with a single bank account.
Yeah. So
I haven't seen it personally, but
no, I haven't seen it either.
Yeah.
I mean, even if the practice is just crushing it and like the bank account balance is growing and growing,
yeah,
people have a hard time taking time away from practice and continuing to pay themselves because they're like, oh, well, money's not coming in now. That's exactly where the system comes in, right? Like, you give yourself permission because that money's set aside for your owner's compensation. You know, you can take a step away and still pay yourself, right? Like,
absolutely.
you give that permission kind of to continue with the purpose of the account.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Yep.
Cool. Anything else you want to share before we kind of wrap up here, Scott?
Yeah, let's talk about, like, what can you do? Like, we've shared a lot of information. And if I were to guess, if you're, listening to this concept for the first time, you're like, holy smokes, this is a lot. Like, where do you even start? Like, I'd have never looked at my 12-month rolling profit and loss. Like, you want me to set up 6 bank accounts, and like, there's a lot here to consider. I think a couple baby steps that I would encourage someone to do, if you're a reader and you like to learn, like, definitely would encourage you to check out the actual book, Profit First, like the original. There's actually also a book that was created for chiropractors, Profit First for Chiropractors. I know you can get that on Amazon. That would be a good place to like learn if you're interested in that.
Mm-hmm.
But just to take a baby step that anyone could do, I would encourage someone to set up one account if they don't have it already and call it Profit. And moving forward, at least once, every time you have cash flow rolling in, maybe it's twice a month, allocate 1% of your collections to your profit account.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, just get into that habit.
Such a good, easy step. I mean, I'm tempted to say, do it to tax because I think.
Me too. Yeah.
I think tax causes more stress than not getting profit.
Yep.
So that would be my temptation, is like, do one account, but call it your tax account and beef up the amount, like make it 5% and just start stacking up money for your tax bill that's coming, because that is inevitable. It's coming. And if you are a clinic owner or practitioner that gets stressed out at tax time every year, that would be my recommendation, is to do that. If tax time doesn't stress you out, cool, then do a profit account.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I love the idea of setting up an account right away for tax as well. It's just a little bit more nuanced without knowing someone's specific situation of like how much should you be allocating towards tax. But yeah, no one, not going to hurt to setting aside 5% of your collections towards tax. That's for sure.
Exactly. Yeah. Not saying that 5% is the number that's going to completely erase your stress when it comes to tax time. But hey, having some money there set aside, if you haven't ever done that, is going to improve the outcome. Ideally, you go through the effort to understand your tax position and set aside the appropriate amount and have a proactive plan. But that can be hard to arrive at on your own without the support of someone like us or your CPA.
Yep, for sure. Yeah, that's the last takeaway. If this is all just way too overwhelming and you're like, that sounds great, I need this in my life. This is what we do. This is kind of our kind of first pillar, right, Chris, that we talk about with all our clients. And it goes back to like, if the engine that's kind of fueling your financial life and fueling your lifestyle and all the goals and everything you want to accomplish, if that's not optimized, it's going to be really hard. So like, why not start there and get the right systems and processes around managing your practice's cash flow efficiently? It'll just open everything up to make things a lot easier in your life.
Yeah, 100%. And even at that, like if you're already running a successful practice, if it's feeling fairly easy for you, like you're doing well, this is still a great system that you should consider. This isn't just for people that are like need to improve or want to get to the next level. You know, even if you're already there, you feel like you've already made it. This can still just bring simplicity to your life. And it is worth, I'd say it's worth the effort for anyone that runs a business.
For sure. Yep.
Cool. Okay. Well, let's wrap it there. I guess we'll say if you felt inspired but overwhelmed, feel free to reach out and we'll help you in any way we can. And if you're wanting to tackle this on your own, go open that first bank account and start putting some money aside.
Sure.
And if those if for our few remaining listeners, if we have any, feel free to check out our financial clarity assessment to see where you stand. And this one of the key pillars in that assessment will be your business, your practice, cash flow management, and taking that assessment will give you a pretty cool insight to see like how you're currently doing that and what room for improvement there might be. So check that out.
Right on. We'll wrap it there.
Cool. Thanks for listening.
For being here. Yeah. We'll see you next time. All opinions expressed on the Chiro Money Show are for educational, informational, and entertainment purposes only. Nothing on this podcast should be considered financial, legal, accounting, or tax advice. Always consult your own team of licensed professionals before making decisions about your finances.